This module is going to move us forward in time as we begin to explore what happened outside of Britain as we move ahead in the 19th century. We want to ask what happened to European and non-European countries that did not industrialize as early as Britain did. We want to know if they did catch up, how long did it take them to catch up? And if they were able to do this, how long did it take them and how did they do it? We'll also ask whether those countries that industrialized relatively late faced not only disadvantages, but perhaps some advantages in the fact that they were able to follow Britain's lead. In the context of our overall story in this class, we continue our discussion of industrialization, but now a few new ingredients are going to enter our story. For example, financial markets are now going to play a really important role where previously I think they've been a little bit on the underside of our story. We'll also spend some time talking about colonialism, which we've also neglected thus far. This is kind of the dark side or the other side of British economic dominance. To theoretically frame our discussion, let me remind you of patterns of convergence or divergence that can emerge in a classic solo growth model. In the solo growth model that you've learned in, I think, macro theory class generally, that model predicts convergence. In other words, income levels in poor countries will tend to catch up to those in rich countries under a specific set of conditions. For example, you need human capital in that model, and you need similar savings rates for physical capital and human capital. Furthermore, within the context of this model, we can talk about either conditional or unconditional convergence. Under unconditional convergence, we would say that all countries will converge to the same one steady state growth rate, which requires an awful lot, versus conditional convergence, which says that poor countries will tend to catch up to rich countries, holding several conditions constant, which often isn't possible. And indeed, we start to see some evidence of conversion in the late 19th century in particular. So it's no longer the case that England or Great Britain is by itself at the top. In particular, what we see is that the USA, by the time we get to the early 20th century, has actually caught up and overtaken Great Britain. Other countries as well appear on this graph, like Argentina, Germany, Sweden. Lots of places are starting to pull up from that flat level of growth that they had before the beginning of the 19th century. In this unit, therefore, we're going to try to connect our discussions of economic history with an overall theory of economic development. You may have heard one statement of a way to connect these two that actually originated with Marx, which said that the industrially more developed country presents to the less developed country a picture of the latter's future. In other words, all countries are kind of walking the same path, but some places get there faster than others. And so if you take a look at a developing country, their future is just a developed country. That assumes that development, as I said, is kind of a well-defined process, or it's kind of like a ladder that all countries just have to climb, but those countries just happen to be at different rungs of that ladder at different times. But that model of development might not be true. In fact, follower nations might be climbing a completely different ladder. Their development might differ completely from the kind that we saw for Great Britain. In the next video, I'm going to talk to you about a particular theory of economic development that disagrees with Marx's story. This is Alexander Grishikran's theory of relative backwardness.